Welcome to the Science of Hockey, the podcast where we break down the science behind ice hockey. I'm the analyst, your host, and every week we explore the data, research, and evidence that shape how we play, train, and understand the game of hockey. From biomechanics to performance psychology, we take you beyond the rink and into the research lab, giving you insights that go beyond hearsay and into what really makes the difference on the ice. Whether you're a player, a coach, a parent, or just someone passionate about the sport, we're here to bring you scientifically backed information in a language that's friendly and easy to understand. So grab your skates and let's dive into the science of hockey. Hello, hockey fans. This is the Science of Hockey, and I'm the analyst. Today, we're tackling a big question. What qualifies as an injury in elite ice hockey? Join us as we explore the data and discuss how redefining injury metrics could revolutionize players' safety and research standards.
All right, welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be talking all about ice hockey today.
Sounds good.
And, well, specifically, elite men's ice hockey injuries.
Right.
You sent in some research on this. Really interesting stuff, and I think it's going to be great to dive in. I know you're pretty deeply involved in the sport, so this is more than just numbers to us, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This is about the physical demands of the sport. How can we protect these players?
Right, for sure.
Let's face it, hockey is, it's a collision sport.
Oh, absolutely.
This research paper you sent mentions players hitting speeds of almost 30 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And that's before you factor in all the body checks and the battles in front of the net and everything else.
Exactly. That's what makes it so important, this research. It's not just about understanding the risks, but finding ways to make the game safer.
Right.
At all levels, from youth leagues all the way up to the pros.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that jumped out at me right away was the kind of the crazy range of reported injury rates.
Yeah.
Anywhere from 13.8 to a whopping 121 injuries per 1,000 player game hours. What's going on there?
Well, that's where things get interesting. A big takeaway from this research is that there's just so much inconsistency in how these studies define injury and athlete exposure, so we're not always comparing apples to apples.
Yeah, something is, you think it'd be straightforward, like an injury rate
Right.
can be misleading if you don't really know what the definitions are.
Exactly, because you think about it. One pro league might define an injury as anything that requires a doctor's visit, whereas a college team might only count injuries that cause a player to miss a game.
Oh, okay.
And that can make a huge difference in those reported injury rates.
So it's like you're trying to measure a room with a ruler, but the ruler keeps changing size.
Yeah, great analogy. And then you throw in the fact that even the definition of a reportable injury has evolved over time. So this research you sent is a great example of that. Back in '91, facial lacerations were considered reportable injuries, and then later on, they added sutures, fractures, then concussions, dental injuries, eye injuries, all added to that list.
Oh, wow.
So comparing injury rates from, 30 years ago to today, it's tough because what might have been a minor injury back then could be a major concern now.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got inconsistent definitions of injury, but then there's this other half of the equation, athlete exposure. What does that even mean in this context?
Well, athlete exposure is basically how much time players are spending at risk of getting injured. So, think of it this way. If you've got 10 players on the ice, for 60 minutes, that's 600 player minutes of exposure.
Right.
It's not just about how many injuries happen, but also how much opportunity there is for those injuries to occur.
Right, it makes sense.
And even how researchers measure athlete exposure isn't always consistent. Some use player game hours, others player games, and they may not even account for the number of players the same way. So it makes it tough to compare those results across different studies.
So it seems like even small variations in how we define and measure these things can have a big impact on those final injury rates.
Absolutely. And it really highlights the need for more standardized methods in sports injury research. Without that consistency, it's kind of like trying to build a house, but without a blueprint.
So I guess what we're learning is a single injury rate number. It doesn't tell the whole story. You need to understand how that number was calculated, what definitions were used. Otherwise, those numbers can be pretty misleading.
Exactly. And that critical thinking is so important for anyone who's involved in hockey. Coaches, trainers, parents, even players themselves.
Yeah, makes sense.
Now, there's this idea in the research. It's called the injury paradox. It's the idea that the very qualities that make a hockey player successful, the size, the strength, the speed, those also contribute to their higher risk of injury.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
It is. Think about the forces involved when a powerful skater delivers a check. Those same attributes that make them a dominant player
Right.
also make them more likely to injure themselves or someone else.
So there's this inherent tension between developing these really powerful athletes and protecting them from the inherent risks of, this high-impact sport.
Exactly. It's a real balancing act. And it shows how understanding the complexities of injury in hockey, it goes way beyond just looking at the numbers.
So what does this all mean for someone like you who's so deeply involved in the sport? How do we make hockey safer without compromising the skills and athleticism that make it so compelling to watch?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one we'll definitely explore more as we continue this deep dive. But for now, the big takeaway is that even something as seemingly simple as an injury rate can be incredibly complex.
And understanding those complexities can empower us to ask the right questions, evaluate information critically, and ultimately make better decisions about player safety and training.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, so we've laid the groundwork here. Injury definitions, athlete exposure. Now let's shift gears a little bit and dive into some potential solutions.
Okay.
What are some of the strategies that are being used to make the game safer? How effective are they? Stay with us, because we're just getting started.
Sounds good. Well, when it comes to making hockey safer, there's no easy answer.
Right.
It's a multifaceted problem that
Yeah.
needs a bunch of different approaches.
Okay, so let's break those down. Where do we even start?
Well, one area where we have seen progress is in rule changes.
Okay.
Aimed at reducing those dangerous hits, like the crackdown on headshots,
Yeah.
boarding penalties, things like that.
All right, so taking the most dangerous plays out of the game, I guess, but how do we know if it's actually working?
Well, that's where the data comes in.
Okay.
By carefully tracking those injury trends and comparing them, before and after rule changes,
Okay.
we can get a sense of whether those changes are having a positive effect.
So it's not just about making a rule, it's about evaluating its impact and adjusting as needed.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process, using that data to guide our decisions and make the game as safe as we can.
Makes sense.
Right.
But rule changes alone can only go so far. What about training?
Yeah.
Can we actually train players to be more resilient,
Oh, absolutely.
less prone to injury?
For sure. Traditional strength and conditioning programs focused a lot on just building strength and speed.
Right.
But now there's this growing understanding that preventing injuries really requires a more sort of a holistic approach.
So it's not just about bulking up, it's about training smarter.
Exactly. You need to focus on flexibility, balance, core stability, even proprioception, which is the body's awareness of its position in space. All of those things contribute to a player's ability to withstand those forces of the game and avoid injury.
It's like building a car, with a stronger chassis and better suspension
Yeah,
to handle those high-impact collisions.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And just like with a car, you need to do regular maintenance,
Right.
recovery, and regeneration strategies. They're just as important as the training itself.
So we're talking sleep, nutrition, active recovery, all that plays a role.
Absolutely. It's about treating the athlete's body as their instrument. Taking care of that is essential for both their long-term performance and their health.
It's not just about pushing limits, it's about building that foundation so that they can, have a long career and have a long, healthy season, right?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, you mentioned equipment a little earlier. What role does technology play in protecting players?
Well, technology is always evolving, and we're seeing some really amazing innovations in protective gear. Helmets are being designed with better impact absorption. Pads are lighter and more flexible, but they still provide protection.
Okay.
And skates are being engineered for better stability and support. Everything's getting better.
So it sounds like there's a constant push to kind of improve the equipment to stay ahead of the curve in terms of safety.
Absolutely. And research is playing a key role in that.
Right.
By studying the biomechanics of injuries and testing different materials,
Right.
we can develop equipment that provides the best protection possible.
So we've talked about rule changes, training equipment. What else is being done to address this whole issue of injuries in hockey?
Well, one area that I think deserves more attention is personalized medicine.
Okay.
Not all athletes are created equal.
Right.
They don't respond to training or recover from injuries the same way.
So that kind of cookie cutter approach, right,
Right.
to training and injury management might not be the most effective.
Exactly. By using genetic testing, biomarker analysis, those more personalized approaches, we can tailor training programs and recovery protocols to the individual athlete's needs.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, recognizing that each player has their own strengths, their own vulnerabilities, customizing their training accordingly.
Now, all this discussion has been focused on men's hockey. Do these same principles apply to the women's game?
That's a great question. And while the fundamental principles of injury prevention and management, they do apply across genders.
Okay.
There are some key differences to keep in mind.
So the strategies might need to be kind of, adapted a little bit.
Exactly.
To address the specific needs of female athletes.
Right. Women's hockey has its own set of challenges, its own injury patterns.
Now, this research paper didn't really dive into the women's game, but it raises some interesting questions.
Right.
Like, what areas would you say need further research when it comes to women's hockey injuries?
Well, I think one area that really needs more attention is the impact of hormonal fluctuations on injury risk and recovery. The menstrual cycle can influence so many things, from ligament laxity to muscle strength. Understanding those hormonal effects is crucial for developing effective prevention and treatment strategies.
So we can't just assume that what works for male athletes is going to work equally well for female athletes.
Exactly. We need research that specifically addresses their unique physiology and biomechanics.
As the popularity of women's hockey continues to grow,
Yeah.
it's essential that we invest in research that can help us understand and mitigate those risks. Right?
Absolutely.
It's about making sure that all athletes, regardless of gender, have access to the knowledge and resources they need to stay healthy and play at their best.
Well said. As we gather more data and refine our understanding of injury in hockey, we can create a safer and a more equitable playing field for everybody.
So we've got rule changes, advancements in training, cutting-edge equipment, personalized medicine, and a need for more research in the women's game. It sounds like there's a lot of momentum building.
There is, but even with all this progress, there's always more work to do.
So what's that next frontier? I mean, what are the big questions that researchers are kind of grappling with right now?
One area that's super exciting is the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning to actually predict and prevent injuries.
AI in hockey. That sounds like something out of the future.
It is. Imagine being able to analyze huge amounts of data from player movements to biometric markers and actually identify players who are at high risk of getting injured before it happens.
Wow, that would be amazing.
It would, and we're already seeing the beginnings of this technology being used. Wearable sensors can track things like heart rate, sleep patterns, providing valuable data about an athlete's overall health and recovery.
So it's about using technology not to just react to injuries, but to actually prevent them in the first place.
Exactly. And as those technologies continue to evolve, I think we'll see a pretty dramatic shift in how we approach athlete health and performance.
It's really exciting to think about the possibilities.
It is.
But even with all these advancements, it's important to remember that technology is just one part of the solution, right?
Right. It's a tool. It can help inform decisions, improve training, but it's not a replacement for human expertise.
Right. Those coaches, the trainers,
Right.
medical professionals, they all play a vital role in keeping athletes safe.
Absolutely. And those human connections, between the coaches and the players, the trainers and the athletes, those are just as important as all the data and technology.
It's about creating a culture of safety where everyone feels empowered to speak up about any concerns.
Right.
And prioritize the well-being of those players.
Couldn't agree more. And by fostering that kind of culture, I think we can make hockey safer and more enjoyable for generations to come.
All right, so this has been a really insightful discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I'm always happy to talk about the science of hockey and how we can make the game better.
Now, for our listener, let's shift our focus to what this all means for you and how you can use these insights in your own involvement in hockey. Whether you're a player, a coach, or a fan, stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive. All right, so we've covered a lot, right?
Yeah, we have.
Everything from the challenge of defining injuries and measuring athlete exposure to the latest advancements in training and equipment, even AI.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
But let's bring it back around. What does this all mean for you, our listener? Your connection to hockey.
I think the big takeaway is that, knowledge is power.
Right.
The more you understand about hockey injuries, the better equipped you are to make good decisions about, your own involvement in the sport.
Whether you're a player, a coach, a parent,
right,
or even just a diehard fan.
There's something here for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for the players out there, take ownership of your training and recovery,
Yeah.
Understand the importance of a solid foundation. Right.
Strength, flexibility, balance. Don't just chase power and speed.
And don't be afraid to speak up, right?
Right.
If you're feeling any pain, any discomfort, anything like that.
Early intervention is key.
Right.
You want to prevent those minor things from becoming major problems.
Absolutely, because I think a lot of times, players try to tough it out.
Right, exactly.
And they just make things worse.
Yeah.
So, remember, your body's your instrument. Take care of it.
It is.
Now, for coaches, what are some takeaways from this research for them?
Well, I think it highlights the need for that holistic approach to training.
Okay.
Incorporate drills that focus on building those injury-resistant qualities, flexibility, balance,
right,
core stability, proprioception.
Yeah.
Create a culture where players feel comfortable reporting any, aches, pains.
Right. Open communication is essential.
Don't just rely on what you see on the ice.
Exactly.
Talk to the players, observe how they're moving.
And be proactive.
Yeah, be proactive.
Yeah, about those potential risk factors.
And every player is different.
Oh, yeah.
Right? What works for one might not work for another.
Exactly. Tailor those plans.
So pay attention to those individual needs.
Absolutely. That's where that personalized medicine approach really comes into play.
Yeah.
If you have access to, genetic testing, biomarker analysis, use those tools to design programs that are specific to each player.
Yeah. Okay. So now what about parents? What can they do to keep their young athletes safe?
Well, parents are often in the best position to recognize those potential injury concerns.
Right.
So be aware of, the common injuries in hockey, the signs, the symptoms, and don't hesitate to seek medical attention if you see something that's just not right.
And remember, it's not just physical health, right?
Yeah.
It's mental and emotional well-being too.
For sure. Hockey is demanding. Make sure they have a good balance between training, competing, and just, resting.
Yeah, encourage that open communication.
Oh, absolutely.
Make sure they have a safe space to talk about any pressures they're feeling, any concerns they have about training, or their performance.
Right, correct.
Even if you're just a fan of the game, there are still insights here for you.
Right, for sure.
Understanding those injuries, it can enhance your appreciation for just how amazing these athletes are.
Yeah, the athleticism, the resilience, it's incredible.
And it makes you a more informed fan.
Absolutely.
Right? You might start to pick up on things like subtle changes in a player's movement.
Right.
That could indicate an injury.
For sure.
Or you'll have a better understanding for, the rule changes.
Right.
The safety measures that are being put into place to protect those players.
And as a fan, you can advocate for more research.
Right. Support those organizations that are working to make the game better.
Absolutely.
So whether you're, out there on the ice, behind the bench, or up in the stands, we all have a role to play in keeping hockey safe and fun.
It's a collective effort.
It is.
And the more we understand about the risks and the solutions, the better we can protect the players and the future of the game.
Well, this has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, remember, knowledge is power. Use what you've learned today to make good decisions, stay engaged with the sport, and advocate for the safety of all hockey players.
Yeah, that's it.
Until next time, stay curious, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.
Great, thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Science of Hockey. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share it with your friends, teammates, or anyone who loves hockey as much as you do. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment to let us know what you liked, what you'd like to hear next, or any questions you have. Your feedback helps us make the show even better. Until next time, keep your skates sharp, your mind open, and keep chasing the science behind the game.